this morning.
Yeah, good Joe. How are you, mate?
Not bad. Tom, thanks for joining me. It's fun to have you on the podcast. I've had goalies on from north of the border up in Canada. I've had some goalies on from over in the UK and even uh, other parts of Europe. But you're the first one from south of the equator.
Awesome.
Yeah. So uh, that leads to probably the most obvious question I have to ask is how does a fellow like yourself get interested in the game of hockey? First of all, I mean, down there you've got football, which is soccer to us Americans. You've got Australian rules football, which is I think best explained rugby without rules. um, you know but you decide I want to play hockey. How does that happen for an Aussie?
Well, for me, so I grew up in a town called Newcastle. It's
Mhm.
about 2 hours north of Sydney, and it's a town in the general area of Newcastle. There's probably about 500,000 people, and we had one rink. So just to give you an idea, I was listening to one of your other podcasts of I can't remember his name, but he was talking about growing up in I think in Toronto, and that he'd been to like 100 rinks and he still hadn't been to all of them. And it's
Yeah.
like far out. There's about 15 rinks in all of Australia, and that's about it. So um, yeah, but I got into it. So I'm 33. So um, I was a little bit after the like Mighty Ducks kind of, wave of people all around the world probably starting to play hockey
Yep.
that hadn't before. So I, in high school, one of my friends, his dad is from Finland.
Okay.
So he got into playing inline hockey, and there was an inline hockey rink in Australia. In Australia, it's a couple in Newcastle rather. And so a couple of kids from around my school and stuff played inline hockey, which was a little bit more popular, I would say, than ice hockey, just
Hmm.
because you can go down to the netball courts or whatever and just have a rip. And as well at that stage, this is early 2000s, it was really difficult to get equipment too. So
Hmm.
just having a pair of rollerblades from like down at Kmart or whatever and grab a stick and you're ready to go made it a little bit easier. So but yeah, so I was probably in year 7, and he was starting to get into ice hockey, and because we had the one rink in Newcastle, and like most other rinks in Australia, the main kind of thing that you do at the hockey rink is you just go for a general skate.
Yeah.
That's by far 98% of people that would interact with ice sports in Australia. It would, or 99% would just be going for a recreational skate. So we would go to the Friday night disco and and try and impress the girls with our crossovers and whatever, uh, and seeing how high we could spray the ice on the boards. That was another test of your mettle, as a young man in Newcastle. So I was starting to go to that a little bit. My mate Patio, who played inline, and then I just kind of followed into that with him, and yeah, just kind of went from there. So
And it's funny you mentioned, the Friday night skates. My job in high school was actually a skate guard at the local
oh,
rink, and we had the Friday night open skates, and I loved it because as a goalie, you know, as a guard, we weren't supposed to be skating around with the whole group. We were just supposed to kind of stand there and watch for stuff. So I always just stood in the crease, and my coworkers always picked on me because I was just working on crease movements as I stood there and watched, for the little kids like yourself running around causing trouble. And but yeah, for Friday night open skate, I don't think as many people do that anymore. Where I mean, it was we. I would show up for a Friday night, you know, to work, and there were probably 200-300 people out there skating. It was just madness, but it was the thing to do back then.
yeah. Well, even here, it was massive. Like
Hmm.
there'd be at least probably, I would say, yeah, same 200-300 kids. It'd be just all the way to like the center
Yeah.
like in the neutral zone, pretty much just thick with people. Like it was crazy. And I ended up when I moved to, so I grew up in Newcastle. I moved to Melbourne, which is further south, about 10 hours south of where I grew up. And when I was there, I was playing for the team there, and working in the pro shop and doing some of the same thing, like doing the ice skating, guard stuff. And I kind of felt like it wasn't just didn't seem as like there was that many young people doing it as back when I was, doing it 20 years ago or whatever. So
So you start skating, out in line, which I think a lot of people, even here in North America, a lot of us kids, we either start on the ponds if you're, living in a cold weather area like myself right now, or you start playing street hockey. And then eventually you convince mom and dad, hey, I want to play hockey. I got to imagine that was a little bit of a shock for them. What was their reaction when you were like, I want to go play this game on ice?
Yeah. So before that, I played a lot of sport when I was younger. I had a go at in Newcastle Rugby League, which is kind of like rugby union, a little bit different rules, but pretty much the same thing. So I played that, but I'm absolutely not built to get tackled by 110 kilo bloke. So I kind of only took a couple of seasons of being in the middle of winter and
Yep.
get my hands tread on by rugby boots to go like, yeah, this isn't what I want to do. But yeah, did that. Did soccer, a couple other things. Cricket, actually was pretty good at cricket. I played kind of club cricket and ended up playing, I think, like state titles or something like that in my cricket team. But yeah, going to hockey was it was a bit of an adjustment. I think for the cost aspect, I think that was something that kind of took them by surprise, because like my mum and dad had no concept of what you did, like what it was, and
Right.
and I think actually doing it, I think they didn't have that much of a problem with it, with me playing, because my dad had played in like the National Rugby League only for about a season, and he was from Sydney. And he did his knee when he was about 20, and that was the end of his career. But me going through that, kind of getting into a sport, really getting into it, I think it was the first one that they were really like. When I got home from school, I was like, had my pair of rollerblades playing on the graveled up street until my stick was probably like that,
Yeah.
And then when I started playing goalie as well, like. We had a retaining wall at the front of our house that was just rocks with concrete, and I'd be out there with a ball, a tennis ball, just pegging it and then catching it. And because it was all rocks and all gnarled up, it would just go anywhere.
Yeah.
So I think once I was every afternoon I was doing that, I was like trying to. Like, we don't have hockey on TV, nothing. There's no access to it, so I was just trying my best to find more out about hockey, and I think when they saw that I was really passionate about it, and it wasn't something that I was going to do for a year and then go on to the next one when I decided I didn't like it anymore. Which was, it's okay if you're just buying a $40 pair of soccer boots and some shin pads. That's not too bad, but yeah. So I think the first gear that I got as well was some inline gear off eBay, like probably way back when eBay just started,
Yep.
probably in like 2004. So I think that made it that first step a little bit more palatable for them, I think, as far as that goes. But I was using the club gear for quite a while there until I could convince mum and dad that I was actually going to keep doing it.
So you mentioned you played cricket, and I got to ask about that sport because I got family that's still in England, and when we went over there, my uncle was trying to explain it to my dad and I, and the fact that one match can take several days. And I grew up playing baseball. You've got the foul lines. You got to hit the ball between those lines. But in cricket, you can hit the ball anywhere you darn well please. Like, why? Why can you hit the ball behind you and it still be okay? I mean, I can get, to the left and right, but it should at least be in front of you.
No, that's that's what makes cricket so good is it's kind of there's a bit of that, I guess, like stochastic element, same as hockey. Like there's that chance thing of like you can, a tip can that wins you the Stanley Cup can be the best knock it out of the air down, bounce in front of the goaltender, or it can be off a defenseman's shin pad.
Mm-hmm.
It's and that I love that aspect of hockey, how you've got to manage that aspect of it as the same as just the skill level, and there is a bit of that in cricket as well. But yeah, I don't know why I don't even know, are the sports even from the same lineage, or did they kind of happen? Is it, did they evolve separately, or what?
It
I don't.
it's
I'm not too sure.
it's kind of up in the air of whether or not they come from the same lineage. I would argue they do, because as legend has it, Abner Doubleday invented the game of baseball out in Cooperstown, New York, and that's where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. That's kind of been disproven, but it's believed it's kind of a mix between a game that the Native Americans were playing and cricket. That's
Yeah,
kind
right.
of the understanding of how it started. It was kind
Because
of a hybrid of the two.
yeah, because cricket would have come over,
Yeah,
I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I get and yeah, I don't know. So it's still kind of like, so I guess the basic rules is you just hit it as far away from the fielders as you can, and then get as many run back and forward, because it's obviously not the diamond. You're just running back and forwards in a straight line
right.
as many times as you can
Yeah,
without them,
yeah.
getting the wicket.
It,
But
it's definitely a game that takes some getting used to as you watch it, and
yeah,
but yeah.
but
So
I was just going to say, with the lasting a couple of days, so that's like there's a couple of different ways that you can play cricket. So those big test matches that you're talking about that do take like 3 days, if you think of it about, instead of it, so what's who there's a number of innings that you have in baseball, and then just whoever has the most runs at the end of that amount of innings is the winner. Is that kind
right,
of how it is? Yeah, so you can play, what I played when I was a kid is you'd play 20 overs. So each over has 7 bowls, and then you get 20 overs. Either they can get all the batsmen out before the 20 overs, and then that's it, or you can keep batting for 20 overs if you're not out of batters. So you only get to bat once as well, so
okay,
you don't keep rotating and come back in. So if you think about that, so that's also, there's the professional cricket circuit. There's T20 cricket, which is you get 20 overs and it's much shorter. So you can have a game of cricket on a Friday night. It starts at 7 and ends at 9. So that's
yeah,
kind of like it's a pretty new thing, actually, that T20 stuff, and it's growing the game a little bit more than it was, because yeah, with the other way of playing it is you play until all your batsmen are out, which can take ages, because if you've ever seen the bowling in cricket and everything, it's not the same turnover as batting in
right,
baseball. You can be there, you can be out there for 2 days without getting out if you just play defensively.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so it's pretty much you keep going until you score enough runs to declare, to say, yep, all right, we're going to bowl against you now. So you've made 350 runs, and then you go, yep, all right, Australia versus England. England, you're in. Now we're going to bowl against you because we think we can get you out for well under 350 runs.
yeah,
Or you all get bowled out. So they're the ones that take ages, because, yeah, you don't have to run when you hit it. You can just block it, and that's it. So
yeah.
it's a totally
There's a
different, yeah, kind of way that it works, even though on the face value it can look quite similar, I guess.
it's a sport that has a lot of nuance, that's for sure. So we'll get back to the hockey talk, where I think most people listening will understand that part of it. So you're a young kid. YouTube isn't really a thing to where it is today, where you can be watching it and finding stuff to watch in hockey. So like me, you're outside just doing whatever you can to hone those skills. when you went to your mom and dad and said, you know what, I want to be a goalie, did they even understand what you were telling them? Or were they just like, okay, cool?
Yeah, I don't really think that they knew we'd have to like get a new set of gear and stuff probably. I know that it took a while for me to get my first set of gear, probably a year and a half, I reckon. I was using the pads in the back of the rink, and the rink was owned by a Canadian expat guy, who'd come over and started it, so he had a bunch of stuff back there. But yeah, I was using Brown's pads for a 6 foot man, and I was 14 years old or something, and probably like one of the old school chesties, that like just have the gaps everywhere and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, like I think they wanted me to keep playing as a player because we already had the gear. When they realized that being a goalie meant that and that was like in my first season.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody rotates, and I had to go in net, and I was hooked instantly. I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do,
Yeah.
100%.
Well, here with USA Hockey, they have initiative to, the initiative's called 50, or I think it's 50 and 30 or something like that, where they want to have 51% of professional goalies across men's and women in North America, U.S. born goalies by the year 2030. And their saying is catch a puck, catch the uh, catch the bug. And it sounds like that's what happened to you. You got that shot at goalie, and you're like, yep, this is for me.
Yeah, I remember that my first shot that I ever got was from I think it would have been maybe just in the blue line, and this is under 14s or whatever, and it's not like in Canada and the
Yeah.
States where if under 14 can actually be an absolute weapon of a player. Like we were all just learning. Everybody starts when they're that age here. Nobody's really playing hockey when they're 6 or whatever. Like there's a couple of people, but mostly it's like my girls are going to be playing when they're 6. So, better believe it. But most other people not really. But yeah, I remember just this puck straight down towards, like, so slow, and because I'd played cricket and I was used to having the ball come at me super fast, so it was really slow, just this puck along the ice, and I dived on it, and of course dived where it was, not where it was going to be by the time I got there, and I went straight through the 5-hole, and it was that kind of, I think, being able to learn that from the first go and just being like, oh, okay, I can see what I did wrong there. I just have to stand where I am and let it hit me. That
Yeah.
I remember it like it was yesterday, and that was definitely the spark. And then as soon as after that game, I was like, yep, no, can I play goalie next week? I want to, can I just play in? And
Yeah.
and the gear was cool too, but the gear that we had was kind of gross, but
Yeah, association gear can always be sketchy. You
oh yeah,
never know what you're going to get, how good it is, how stinky it is, but still something about it. I think the goalies that have had to use the association equipment, it's almost like it's a badge of honor. Like, yeah, that's how I
oh yeah,
started.
yep.
Because me, I started playing in the mid to early 90s, and our association equipment was still from the 1970s. So I was like, yeah, I had to learn in that stuff. My first chest protector was 2 pieces. You had the arm pads, which were just thin felt with maybe a little something in there, and then it looked like a baseball catcher's chest protector. That was my first chest and arm pad. And it's like, geez, and I still kept playing. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I think we weren't far off that in Newcastle in 2004. So,
Yeah, it's crazy. It even just the way equipment has evolved since the early 2000s to today. I
oh
just a
yeah,
year ago I got my first set of pads in like 20 years, and it was night and day the amount of protection. And I'm sitting here, I've never worn knee pads under my equipment. And I started playing in an era when we didn't, have the thigh rises or anything. We should have worn knee pads, but we didn't. So now I've got these new ones. I'm like, why the heck would I wear knee pads? And these young goalies are like, oh, you don't want to get hit on the, lower thigh. I'm like, it might happen once a year and it really doesn't hurt, guys. Like, to
Yeah.
me, I feel like you need to let that happen so that you remember, oh, maybe it does hurt and I don't want to make that mistake again. I want to do things right. Um, so you start playing, you got one rink in town. I mean, were you guys playing just other teams from the area? How many teams were you even playing? Because I can't imagine there were too many teams that you could play against.
So, probably I don't know. Maybe in smaller towns in the US and Canada, you'd have an in-house league.
Yep.
Yeah. So we wouldn't be. So there was like the recreational or just house leagues, and everybody in Newcastle played in those. So everybody was just from another part of Newcastle or outside of Newcastle. Closest to the rink kind of thing, up to probably an hour away. So we would just play each other. There was a couple of grades of that all through. I think it was we had a like a mites, a bantam, and midgets, and then it was just senior whatever.
Yeah.
But we had that, and then we had our rep team. So we had a North Stars. So it was a Newcastle North Stars. Wonder where they got that name from. Really, you can't even see the North Star from Australia. We're in the Southern Hemisphere, but anyway. But yeah, so we had the North Stars, and we had a bantam rep team and a midget rep team, and then there was a state kind of men's competitive league called the East Coast Super League, which was like just open men's competitive. And then there was the National League, which was like major cities like the Semi-Pro League. And back then it was nothing like it is now. So you'd play up in your house league, and then you'd go to the tryouts for the rep team. And then so when I first started, there was only a rink in Newcastle. Sydney had about 4 or 5 rinks, I think, which is a lot. But there's 3 million people in Sydney. So comparatively, not many. But for Australia, like it was crazy. It blew my mind that there was that many rinks there. But and then there was Canberra. So Canberra is the capital. It's inland. It's not on the coast, and it's about 4 hours inland from Sydney. And then so that it was that, and then the Central Coast ended up getting a rink, and that's 45 minutes from Newcastle. It's right in between. So Newcastle's here, Sydney's there, and Central Coast is right in the middle.
Okay.
So when we were playing rep, we ended up having pretty much every Sydney rink had a rep team, and then there was Newcastle and the Central Coast. I think sometimes Canberra might have put a rep team in, but for us, it'd take 5-6 hours to get there. So we wasn't really happening. But yeah, so once you got to that stage where you made that rep team, you were starting to kind of play competitive hockey, really. But it was one division. You were just playing in the rep team. And then, I guess other than that, then from the rep teams, you would try and make the state team. So New South Wales is the state where all those are, and where I am. And then there'd be a single national tournament where it was a round robin, and it'd be Queensland has a couple of rinks, New South Wales, Victoria, ACT, South Australia, Western Australia, and there's another couple of states in Australia, but they don't have rinks, so they just don't have a team.
It's probably not fair for me to tell you that my home rink that I skate at has 8 sheets of ice.
Yeah.
And there's a rink right down the street with 2 more. So in about a 4-mile radius, we have 10 sheets of ice here in Minnesota.
There'd be towns over there that are, town of 50,000 people, and there'd be more sheets of ice than there are in Australia for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, where I'm at, it's getting to the season where if I wanted to, I'd be putting up the backyard rink this weekend, but we stopped doing that. But it's that time of year where we're at, where people just start putting the boards up in their backyard and flooding it and keeping it nice and skatable for the season. doesn't quite get that cold by you guys for that to. I
No,
mean, you
not
get
where
snow, but
yeah, we do have mountains. There is a big mountain range, but nobody lives up there, so
mhm.
there's no hockey up there. I think one time we were going to do some sort of a promotional thing where we're going to go up and on one of the. So they've got snowfields up there, and they've got obviously the ponds like on the field for the
Mhm.
snowmaking, and they were gonna put the pond down and we were gonna play some pond hockey on it, but I don't think that happened. It's a lot of those kind
Yeah.
of ideas that don't go anywhere. In like,
Yeah.
oh, we'll do this; it'll be great for hockey in Australia. It's no.
Yeah, they sound good at the pub, and then you start looking into making it happen. It's like, it's a little more work than we're up for. Now, I know I'm
Yeah.
listening to like the Spit and Chicklets podcast and stuff that the NHL has done some work to bring players down there in the off season, put on some exhibition games to help grow the game. Have you seen the game grow quite a bit over the years, or is it still quite small and niche?
So, compared to when I started, so the AIHL, and I'd probably rate that growth through the growth of the national league. I would say
Mhm.
might be fairly accurate way to do it. And as well, bro, through like I don't know. Once you get to that kind of higher level, you do. I guess because I moved to Melbourne as well, so I didn't really see the growth in the local scene kind of thing in Newcastle. I kind
Yeah.
of got disconnected from that, so it's hard to tell. But for example, the AIHL, which is one of two national semi-pro leagues in Australia, it started in 2002 with 4 teams, and it's now has 10 teams. The imports that used to come in the 2004 2005 were like guys that played junior B,
Hmm.
and they weren't guys that were making a paycheck. I think maybe some of the, I don't know what the college divisions would have been back then, but probably bottom division college players and stuff, where now not only do we have a lot more teams, a lot more people playing, the caliber of the imports that come over here is pretty much minimum would be probably a good SPHL player or a ECHL, regular ECHL player.
Hmm.
A lot of guys that have played in the NHL, or guys that have played in the NHL, it's a little bit more limited. I think over here it's because it's more about connections and who you can get,
Hmm.
and who's as well, because it's in your off season. So
Right.
it's people that are willing to go play their full season and then get on a plane, go to Australia and play another 30 games of hockey.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a limiting factor for who we can get. And I think the level of hockey has at the top end has really, really improved. Unfortunately, though, at least in New South Wales, we've lost in the last 5 years. I think we've lost 3 or 4 rinks from sit. So where half the rinks in New South Wales, I think, have closed in 5 years.
Well, I got to imagine COVID shutdowns probably didn't help that.
Yeah, probably not. But we had a fairly kind of comprehensive government response to like helping businesses, and like you could get loans with no interest, and everybody was getting, for every employee you got their wage plus more and stuff like that. So there would have been aspects like that, but I think the big thing that's happening with attrition of rinks in Australia that's kind of happening now is these were all rinks that were built in the 70s and 80s, and now they need new roofs, new big structural
The maintenance.
maintenance, and they just can't afford it. And as well, the price of property, especially in Sydney, has gone through the roof. Like, where I am, so I don't live in Newcastle anymore. I've actually moved for work. But where I am here in a place called Dubbo, it's 5 hours inland, so no hockey rinks. But a house here is about $400,000. In Sydney, you'd be paying $1.5 million for a house.
It's like
And
California
the Australian
here.
dollar is 75 cents to the Americans. So if you look at that, 1.2 million or whatever, like, and Sydney is expanding so much that the land that those rinks are on is worth so much money, and they can't afford to upkeep them because we get zero. Like the sport of hockey gets absolutely no government assistance in any way.
Mm-hmm.
So there isn't. You can't get I think you could probably get grants and stuff maybe, but you know, a lot of rinks are looking at like collectives now for people to like buy in to maintain the rink and stuff like that. But as you said, everybody's just been through COVID. Like nobody can do it, you know. So it's it's a bit of a bummer in that sense. But
we get through COVID and these businesses think, all right, we're going to try and fight back. And now we see a global recession setting in. And it's like, you know, so any of those businesses, especially like the rinks, like you said, that have these major infrastructure upgrades that they need to think about, it's easier just to close the doors than it is to raise funds for that and hope you're going to keep the business coming in. So, I mean, I get it from a business standpoint. It just, it's a bummer for, you know, guys and gals like yourself that just want to skate.
Yeah. And because I think that if there wasn't such a, like a financial, you know, aspect of being able to play hockey, I think it'd probably be more likely that we'd be able to get some funding. But I can kind of, playing devil's advocate, I could see it how like, well, how much does it cost to just have an oval?
Mm-hmm.
And rugby players, soccer players, cricket players, AFL players, everybody else can play on it.
Right.
Or we give you $5 million for the 800 people that play ice hockey and the couple of hundred figure skaters. You know, like I can see on that, but at the same way, there's I don't know. It's a bit of a thing that's an issue, I think, with us being able to grow our sport. You know, as far as having some sort of there's no real on a larger scale. I don't think there's very much kind of cohesion between being able to get government to help and, you know, that kind of stuff. And there's just not enough people. I think there's about 4,000 registered ice hockey players in Australia, and there's 26 million people in Australia. So, you know, like it's a pretty small sport. And then unfortunately it costs more for a hockey rink and gear and everything than almost any other sport other than maybe motorsport, you know? So it's, you know, the league that's just started, the PHL that I played in last season, you know, that people are trying to find ways to make something happen. And because the game's just going to kind of stagnate, kind of probably already has a little bit, and it grew a lot. And then I think from 2000 to 2010, 2012, 2014, it grew. And then it's been stagnating for about 10 years. So,
well, and from the Aussies I know and what I've learned about, you know, Australia, if they can just get the game in front of enough people, it's the kind of game that it speaks to the heart of the Aussies. It's brutal. You know, there's strategy. It seems like a game that if enough people down there would see it, they would love it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just from people that I talk to, you know, whenever I meet new people or whatever, you know, and they ask what I do or whatever, or see it on my social media or whatever, and they say, "Oh, ice hockey! Oh, that's so cool!" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's great. You should watch it. Like, come to a game. You know, like get into it, get amongst it. You know, and people do. Like Australians love sport. just the speed, the aggression, like it's all there. It's everything that we love in sport. And it's just there's that kind of barrier. I think a big part of it as well is probably facilities, because when I was in Melbourne, the rink that we played at in Melbourne had a capacity of about 1,800, or you could get about 2,200 people in there if you really cram them in. But that's the biggest and best rink in Australia. And it's got just seating on one side, and the other side is just a big wall. So when I played for the Melbourne Ice, when we had our derby games, so there was 2 Melbourne teams, the Melbourne Ice and Melbourne Mustangs, we would sell out almost every single game, and it'd be an electric atmosphere, like so many people crammed into the barn, like, hometown rival. Like, it was just just great games of hockey, really. And we're usually matched up really well together. So it was a real, everybody's history, those rivalries and stuff like that, and like that kind of thing's great. But then in Newcastle, the capacity is about 700. So you literally can't have, you can have 700 diehard fans, but
it's hard to grow the game if all you get are the diehard fans every week. There's not much room for the casual fan.
Yeah.
Now,
and a lot of times the rinks are in industrial areas and stuff like that. There isn't restaurants around. It's hard to get to. You never walk past it or see it on a billboard. I've never seen ice hockey on a billboard in Australia ever. But I've seen baseball, because we've got a professional baseball league in Australia as well.
Yeah.
And basketball and every other thing, but I've never seen hockey. But at the same time, if you don't have the fans and you don't have the money, how are you going to do it? It's a bit of a tricky one.
You almost need somebody with some deep pockets that just loves the game to go out there and say, look, I'm going to do what I can. And again, I'm going to be sheepish as I share this one. I live in Minnesota. Our high school state tournament, they host it at the Xcel Energy Center where the Minnesota Wild play. They sell out the Xcel Energy Center, all 20,000 seats for these championship games. There's 2 classes for big schools and small schools, and they air the games on network TV. And I've been to the rink for just some of the preliminary games, and you talk about an electric atmosphere, and this is for high school hockey. It's crazy. But again, it's because it's available, more people can see it, and it's crazy. Like you said, I really do feel that if they could get it in front of enough Aussies, it could explode. Maybe we need another Mighty Ducks movie or something to hit it big and get people excited again.
Yeah, well, I think that's like I've seen that the NHL's looking at coming to Melbourne.
Yeah, I think 2 or 3 games next year.
Yeah, something like that would be an incredible shot in the arm for Australian hockey. But so we had another thing. I think it was an annual thing from about maybe late 2000s through to about 2016 or something, called just like Canada versus USA hockey something or other. And it was there'd be 1 or 2 ex-NHL players, and then it'd be pretty much a bunch of college players usually, or some guys from the SB and stuff like that, would come over and do a tour through major cities, and they would sell out 20,000 seats for those games, because it'd be put up, it'd be advertised, it'd be really, really pushed. But, it's kind of like, so that happened. That's a great opportunity for before that game, or even halfway through in the period intermission, get an AIHL, get a local All-Stars, Australian All-Stars to play for 15 minutes. And or something like, just like I had friends that went to that stuff and they'd be like, yeah, I didn't even know that there was an Australian league. And it's like, how could you go to that and there'd be zero, not over the loudspeakers, not over any like pamphlets or anything. It's just kind of like, how can that opportunity get passed up? How wasn't there a way to make it work there?
Yeah.
But, I don't know the ins and outs of it, obviously business and everything like that. But there seems to be a lot of those kind of things that happen here, and I think because it's not, there just isn't the like, experience of how to grow it and how to work in those really high up professional sporting spaces. That there's a skill gap there, I think, in the leagues and in the teams and everything like that, where like I just don't think that the game here has the know-how to really break through to that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, I work in marketing. So to your point, yes, they should be having stuff on the Jumbotron during whistles, intermission, stuff in the program, promoting the local hockey programs. And, up here, during intermission, they'll bring out the little kids for 5 minutes before this, because I used to drive a Zamboni in college, so I know it takes about 12 minutes to clean the ice. Well, if intermission's 20 minutes, they'll give these kids 5-10 minutes to do a little skate around, shoot out, whatever. No reason they shouldn't do that when the NHL comes back. One intermission
Yeah.
have the local kids, another intermission have, some of the senior players out there. Just, it makes sense, promotes the game both to the casual fan. We can keep watching this after we.
Yeah, and I think that it will, like, once that comes out, it will be another bump, I reckon. But I feel like the health of a sport can't be dependent on those events.
Right.
It's
right.
That's not something that'll grow and sustain, I don't think.
So I can't remember who I had talked to that told me I needed to check out your profile, and then I was like, okay, yeah, now I want to get you on the podcast.
Shay Spanier, maybe?
It probably was Shay.
Yeah.
I'm almost certain it was, now that you mentioned that, because it was right before he went over to Israel that he and I talked. But you play semi-pro in Australia. So my question is, what does that mean to somebody like me? What is semi-pro hockey in Australia?
All right. So at the moment we've got a couple of leagues. So we've had the AHL, which I was talking to about you before. So for a long time in that, you'd be, you've got your tryouts and whatever, make the team. When you sign your contract, it says that you're not allowed to get paid. That's definitely not the case though. So some players would get paid, some players would, most players wouldn't, vast majority of players wouldn't. You wouldn't have to pay for your travel or anything. There's no cost. You'd get gear from your team. So it's probably more like I would say what hockey is here is probably more like what you'd have in a maybe in like a high level junior, but not like the Q or anything like that. You play, you kind of, the team helps you out with stuff, and then you go, like, we fly because we've got 8 teams or 6 teams or 10 teams depending on the year, but we'd be flying to play because it's 1,000 kilometers from Sydney to Melbourne, and then another 1,000 kilometers to Adelaide, and then 3,000 kilometers to Perth. So Australia is very big.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's pretty much the same size as the US.
Yeah.
But the teams, the cities that the teams are in, so only 6 cities that have teams. Sydney has 2, Melbourne has 2, and this is the RHL I'm talking about here. And so we would be flying from Newcastle on the east coast to Perth on the west coast to play or whatever. So it's think of it being that kind of junior level, or even maybe like level of the Fed, kind of, as far as what you're doing, but you're not. It's not a full-time gig,
right?
But you've got to fly from New York to Los Angeles to play a game, and so it's a bit funny in that sense. So it's I don't know. I've had people on YouTube kind of ask me in quite creative ways, oh, you're not semi-pro, or this isn't pro hockey, or whatever. And I don't know, it kind of is and it isn't. It's a weird, you can't really compare what the RHL is, I don't think, to anything really in the US or Canada. Maybe like a senior league, like maybe like a senior league that has ex-college players and whatever that just kind of play on the weekends. So our games are only on the weekends. Almost everybody has a job that they're 9 to 5 during the week. We train three times a week, 2 times a week, and then you'd have off ice, in between that, almost every day. But again, with having short, like a low number of rinks, your rink that you play out of isn't your rink. It's not administered or owned or managed by your team that you play for. So you can't get on the ice whenever you want. You book in ice the same as the local club team does. So it's not like you've got your home dressing room and all that. Some rinks do, but most don't. So it's kind of a weird in between. I think kind of between senior and like a very low semi-pro or minor pro kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I think, what is it? Where do the Whitby Dunlops play? That team. That's like a senior. That's like I think a high-level senior team in Toronto or something.
Probably, yeah. Sounds like it.
Yeah. So one of the guys that plays in the RHL, his name's Anthony Kimlin, is a great goalie, one of the best Australian goaltenders. He played for a number of years over there, and I think that's kind of maybe a similar thing where it's you play on weekends, you train a couple times a week, and like they might get a little bit of money for it. It's definitely not your income, but yeah, that's kind of what it is.
So you're playing down in Australia. Hockey's not the biggest sport down there, and you decide to play goalie. How do you find, and you're not that much younger than me, so you're coming up kind of YouTube days to really figure out, how do I do this? How were you figuring out how to play the position? Was it a lot of just you're thrown out there, trial and error? Were there any goalie coaches, or was there anybody to help? How did you kind of get good at the position?
So I can't remember who my dad knew or got the connection through, but I had a bit of a pen pally kind of connection with a goalie that was playing for the Alaska Aces, and I don't know what league it would have been back then. I don't know if it was I don't know, it's 2006, probably 2005, 2006. So he would send over like the I'm blanking on it now, the goalie magazine.
Goalies World.
Yeah. So I'd get copies of In Goal posted over to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have very early days of the internet. I'd go on LimeWire and download many computer viruses, and every now and then I would get a highlight video of an NHL highlight video. So I'd get my watch fix on that. And one of my friends who also played, his dad had Foxtel, and so at 2 a.m. there'd be NHL games.
Yeah.
So we'd go over on Friday night and stay up until 2 a.m. or whatever and watch an NHL game. And like, this is back in 2005, so it was Fox, and it was on, I don't know what TV it was, but it was coming from all the way over, and so you could hardly tell what was going on. It was so bad, like it was such bad kind of quality. But a lot of people that were involved in the sport, they were expats, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in Sydney, so Sydney's 2 hours from Newey, there was a kid who played goalie named Jimmy Herbert, and his dad was from the Czech Republic. I think Czech. Anyway, and he was a goalie, so he coached Jimmy, and I would go there on Sunday mornings or whatever, drive to Sydney, and for a 6 a.m. or whatever goalie coaching session with him. So there was no goalie coaches really in Newcastle. The whoever was the goalie for the North Stars team would coach, and that's pretty much everywhere across Australia. It'd be whoever the goalie is for the AHL team would also do some coaching. But as far as dedicated goalie coaches, there wasn't many. For the first long while, it was just, jumping in, see what happens. I had a friend up the road that would come down and shoot tennis balls at me with my hockey stick. And this is before I had my pads, and I'd put my cricket helmet on, have my cricket leg pads, and I had a baseball glove, and I got a big bit of foam and put it on the back of my cricket, like taped it to my cricket glove.
Yep.
And I'd hop in net. And I think I didn't even have a goalie stick at that stage. I think I just used a cricket bat in my blocker hand as well. And we'd just be in our garage, and he'd just smash tennis balls and whatever at me. Ended up moving to pucks. So I think I got over my fear of getting smashed with pucks, like in the garage, by this kid from up the road. But and destroyed the inside of the garage as well. So that's kind of where I started to kind of get an idea about the movement and how to, like, obviously I wasn't dropping into butterfly then at all, like,
right.
But it was a bit of that, just getting the initial hand-eye understanding. But I'd already played cricket and stuff already, so I did have a bit of a I knew how to use my hands and move my body and stuff in relation to an object, I guess. So and then from there we started to go to Sydney, got some coaching, and but for a lot of Australian players, once you get to a point which would be like seriously single A, maybe double A level, or in like bantam or whatever, if you or midget, as far as kind of, and I know that's different in every town or whatever, but kind of you know what you're doing enough to be able to purposely play the game, I guess, rather than just go haphazardly. You pretty much have to go overseas, like at that point. So it's a really early point in your hockey life, usually, that you're, unlike the coaches would say it, like, if you want your son to get any better at the game, they've got to go overseas. And so instead of going to the next town that had a better team that you could go try out for, or having a number of divisions or whatever, or going and skating with the junior team or whatever, you've got to travel to the Northern Hemisphere. So you got to go 15,000 kilometers or whatever to see if you can make that step almost from A to double A level of playing or something like that. So it's a really big filter for being able to progress at the game. And I was lucky enough that I was able to. I went over just to some coaching camps in the Czech Republic. And that was the first time I'd gotten help from this guy in Sydney, but that's the first time I think that I was around what would be just a normal summer camp, I guess, in Canada or the US, that kind of atmosphere of like competitive hockey, people that knew what they were doing, seeing people on the ice that were just like light years ahead of anything that I'd seen, you know what I mean? And at this stage, I was playing in the rep comp, and I was, one of the big dogs in the rep comp between the pipes kind of thing, or at least I thought I was, and then you go and you hop on the ice, and there's like a 12-year-old or something that skates better than an 18-year-old, the best 18-year-old you've ever seen on your ice, you know what I mean? Yep. And it really does bring you down to earth a little bit, but so I went over, did a couple of camps over in Czech Republic, came back. This is when I was about 15 or so now. And then I played I was going from that to playing in the the state men's league, so the East Coast Super League, and I was training with the Central Coast AHL team just as a training goalie or whatever. And that had people that knew how to play the game. There was expats that had played junior or college or whatever overseas, so there were people that knew where to put the puck, knew how to read the game. And I guess that's the thing that you kind of don't get in Australia, is a real feel for the game, because you're just not you're not exposed to it as much. Like the reads, it's very different, not being able to have that much exposure, I think, is a bit of a thing. But and then I went over to Notre Dame, in Ethel Murray College of Notre Dame in Saskatchewan.
Yep.
So I went over there. A couple of Aussies have always kind of gone over there. I think there must be some sort of, I don't know, connection or something with some people in New South Wales ice hockey. And like at this stage, I was 16 or whatever. So I didn't really, that was all kind of happening behind the scenes for me, with my dad kind of trying to tee that stuff up for me, I think. But yeah, I went over there, and it was a bit of a culture shock, I think, for me, going from, subtropical Newcastle on the beach. Like I'd play hockey, but then I'd surf every summer. Like I'd be surfing with my mates and skateboarding and doing all that. And I was getting into music as well. So I was like going to, listening to records and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden you're in Saskatchewan and it's a pretty big shift. So I was over there for a little bit, came back, and then was playing in the National League here. So was playing for Newcastle, played a couple games. So that's kind of how I stepped my kind of stepping up to that. And it really is for us, it's you've got to, if you want to get any better, you pretty much have to go and play in Europe or in North America. And a lot of the time as well, you go to the college, you go to those campuses that have a program, because you can't go and try out for anywhere because you're over there. It costs $5,000 to get you and your dad or you and your mum to go over.
Yep. So
you can't just rip up the road to the other school or the other, hockey association and give it a go. It's and if you do want to take that next step and do the training, you've got to use that as your opportunity to try and learn the next part of the game for you, and learn how it works on a different level.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Now, I was just looking at the clock. We've been talking almost an hour. Doesn't feel like it. But I want to be mindful of that, because I know you said you listened to at least one of the other episodes. So, I end every episode with a list of 10 questions. They're the same questions I've asked every guest. So from Eddie Balfour, Kelly Rudy, to Shea, down to bantam goalies. So the first question is, what's the craziest coaching moment from your playing days where a coach just lost it?
Oh, far out. I was having to think about this. I can't really think of one off the top of my head. I could probably use one from the past season that I probably is still a little bit too fresh to really go with, but as you could, so I guess I'll just do it from a perspective of my experience with Australian hockey. As you could imagine, like having a league like what we've got over here, and there's really super competitive, but it's also a little bit bush league at times as well. There's coaches that have been kicked out of games. A coach here got kicked out of the game for screaming at the ref or something like that. Ripped around the other side of the rink, had a go at the fans that were having a go at him, went up to the bar, cracked a beer, watched the rest of the game from the bar. and he's a good friend of mine, so I might keep him anonymous for now. I don't know. I haven't asked him if I could tell that story, so I might just leave it at that. But a lot of those kind of yeah, it's not nobody's getting fines or anything like that, so you can just kind of just shoot from the hip, when stuff gets pretty hairy. So
Yeah, that's good. So the next question, what's your favorite all-time goalie mask?
oh, my favorite mask. Well, I don't know. I was a Brodeur fan
Hmm.
when I was growing up, but I really like a pretty basic design. I've got Matt Murray wore. I'm like, I don't know. Matt Murray's a bit of a funny goalie. As far
Yeah.
as how his kind of he plays out. Like sometimes I really like watching him, and then sometimes I kind of But anyway, like his. So I don't know who, or I think I do know who it's from, but I can't quite remember it. I'll just grab this one. Oh wait. No, wrong mask. Sorry. But like he had one when he was in Pittsburgh of the triangles,
Yep.
like the black and the. I really love that kind of really basic style, and you can probably see up with my other one from last season up there. And so I guess probably those kind of 80s, like probably not in particular, but that 80s style of just block
Yeah, the
patterns.
simplistic. And
Yeah,
I'm the same way. To me, I love the ones where you can tell what the mask is when you're watching on TV or in the stands.
yeah,
You know, the other ones, they're beautiful up close, but when I'm watching on TV, I'm like, what am I looking at?
yeah.
So I'm with you. Although, there's been some recently, and Brodeur did this later in his career, where you saw what the mask was, but then there was some of kind of the hidden stuff that you didn't see till you were up closer. I think those are cool too.
Yeah, yeah. I think they're great. I love that how it's kind of it just goes through to another level, and instead of it being a straight like a line, it's actually all got all the intricate stuff in it. I really liked Holtby's one that he was going to wear in Vancouver, then he didn't end up wearing.
Yeah,
I think you know the one I'm talking about.
yeah,
I thought that looked great. And that had a bit of that kind of stuff in it. And I guess he's had some of those kind of masks as well.
yep,
Yeah, and it's kind of funny, even the question, just as probably a narrative on Australian hockey, because we don't have our hometown team, we don't have our hometown anything as far as a league like the NHL and stuff like that. So a lot of goalies in Australia, you'll probably find that we don't really connect as much with a single goalie.
hmm,
It's just those larger ideas of stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It's just something that I noticed with listening to other podcasts and stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, I watched this. I remember the first time I saw this goalie, and I remember I'd watch Hockey Night in Canada, and it'd be blah blah blah. And for us, it's just
yeah,
like we don't care. Like it's ice hockey. We just want to watch it. We just
yeah.
want to
I, I
have more
I
of it.
watched the
So
game I could get on the TV, and I grew
yeah,
up a Blackhawks fan, but when I was a kid, the owner of the Blackhawks wouldn't televise home games. So most of the hockey I watched on TV was other teams. We could watch the Hawks when they were on the road, but again, if they were on the road, they were usually on the West Coast, and they were, playing 2 hours later. So a 7 o'clock start time for them was 9 o'clock our time. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to bed here soon. I'm a kid.
yeah,
So I grew up watching other teams for the most part. So somewhat similar, right? Although I still had my team, I still had my goalie, but
yeah,
it was watch whatever you could get and be happy
yeah,
with.
for sure.
So the next question, what's your favorite rink that you've played at?
So probably the rink in Melbourne, the O'Brien Arena. I remember. So I played hockey until I was 18, and then I stopped for I took about 7 years off playing hockey in that time, and I was playing music. I was touring bands and recording and life was just going in a completely different direction. Then I came back to it, and that rink wasn't built before I left. And then when I came back, and our rinks here, at least up until recently, most rinks didn't have glass. We would have just netting. Like, so we'd have the boards, then we'd have netting. Our rink in the Central Coast was like that, just had netting. And, you know, you'd be getting dressed in a party room. You wouldn't have a proper lock. You know, it wasn't hooks on the thing. It'd be chairs, kind of like the pictures from the away room team at the Yotes. You know, this year, a bit like that, but you know, a lot smaller and a lot grosser. Yeah, so that rink is really good. Like I said, you can fit you can cram about 2,200 people in there if you know, really pushed. But glass, it's got a number of purpose-built rooms, heaps of like, it's got a gym, it's got a bar, like it's got 2 sheets as well. So there's like there's the rec skating and figure skating, and then the hockey rink. And that is you know, playing there and having imports come over, and a lot of the players, that Australian players that play in the higher leagues as well, have played overseas. But yeah, you know, I think on standard, it's actually a pretty, no matter where you'd be, it'd be a pretty good standard of rink. Yeah.
So you mentioned you took some time off, and this is somewhat of a similar progression for a lot of goalies I talk to that are older. Is you took time off, but then you come back to the sport. What was it that brought you back to hockey, where you're like, yeah, it's time I get back on the ice and get at it again?
Well, I had stopped up playing when I was living in Newcastle when I was about 18. The last games I played for were for Australia in the Div 3 World Championships or whatever, and then I kind of left it from there. Couple of things were going on, and I kind of just needed a break from a few things, you know, around hockey. And I was playing music. I moved to Melbourne for music, so I was playing in bands and stuff in Newey. Moved to Melbourne, and one of the reasons why I stopped playing actually was because I was actually going to go on. I think I was going to go play with a junior B team that off season, like that summer. It had pretty much been lined up for me to go and play, and I'd been playing back to back over North America, Australia for about 3 years. And I just couldn't, I just needed,
Burned out.
to get away, just burned out. Yeah. And so I was living in Melbourne, playing in bands and stuff. And then somebody told me about that. A guy that I played a show with had actually written the theme song and recorded the theme song for the Melbourne Ice. So there, when they come out onto the ice and everything, like, and they were this kind of punk rockabilly band, and it was a bit like the Dropkick Murphys kind of style, you know, like that, like shipping down to Boston kind of thing, like that feel. So and I was just talking to him at a show or whatever, and was like, oh yeah, you used to play ice hockey, and like, oh yeah, well there's a team here, we wrote the song for them. Like, oh yeah, I'll have to go down and suss it out. and like I said, like, I'd never been to that rink before. All the other rinks are kind of like just very, very basic, no glass and quite old. And then got in there and was just kind of like awestruck by how nice it was. It was the first rink that looked like it was a rink from a hockey country that I'd ever seen in Australia. So that kind of drew me back to it a bit. And then I got my mum to post down my bag of hockey gear that was like, you know, growing mushrooms out of it under the house or whatever, you know, for the last few years. So I got that down and was just playing pickup, like drop-in hockey as a player. And I was kind of like, I don't know, like with me playing goal, I don't like playing net if it's not competitive. I'd much rather be playing as a forward or a defenseman if I'm just having a muck around. And so I got back into it, playing a bit of pickup hockey, and I played. One of the people got me to play in the local in-house league, and they were like, "Oh yeah, come and play, blah blah." Like, oh yeah, all right. And then I think I had to fill in as goalie for a training or something like that. And again, I didn't have any gear. It was all still up in Newcastle, my goalie stuff. And just kind of fell in love with it again. And pretty much as soon as I got it on and got out there, it was that kind of like, that was awful. I was so bad. I'm so much better than that. Like I gotta get back on the ice and get, it was that challenge of just wanting to see how far I could get with it. And so I kind of made the choice then to be like, all right, well, if I want to do this, I'm going to do it properly. And it took me a few years, but I kind of set the goal to myself, like I'm going to get back in the AHL. Like I'm going to get back to where I was and try and go further. And I did. It took a long time. It took 4 years, I think, of pretty hard training and consistent, work to get there. But I ended up being able to get there. So that was good. But I think needing that time off, I think I was a bit more of a level human being after taking some time away from it, and probably helped me a lot.
Well, all the goalies I've talked to that have taken time off, you appreciate the game a little bit more. And if you have a bad game, you're not as frustrated with it. It's like, it was a bad game, but you know what? It happens. I think it's okay sometimes to take that time away and fall back in love with the sport.
Definitely, yeah. And it was nice to be from probably having it. So like I said, when I was younger, my dad was kind of a big part of hockey for me, and kind of pushing me a little bit. And I think doing it under my own steam and having my own, it was my choice to do it. That had a big impact on how I was approaching it as well. So
yeah, that's awesome. So back to the questions. What is your favorite stick that you've used?
Probably the 2S Pro.
Okay.
Like with the ergo spine kind of thing in the back of it. I love those things. Like I wish I could be cool and be like, oh yeah, my old CCM foam core, like all wood. But straight up, that stick is best. I just snapping pucks off that thing onto the glass. It's just a dream. I love it. And it's so light, so great. I did love, I remember, although I got like a 6K red Reebok, like RBK stick, was one of the first kind of not secondhand good sticks that I ever got. And I think I've still got it somewhere in the house. And that has a very special place in my heart. But as far as actually playing, the 2S for sure, like hands down, is.
I've heard a lot of good stuff about that stick. So, so what's your favorite youth hockey memory?
Youth hockey? Well, I probably in two very different ways. So, the first kind of, I guess, rep or wall competitive non-house league game that I played was in a town called Coffs Harbour, which is, I think, about 3 or 4 hours north of Newcastle. And they've got a little rink there that is, I think it's about 15 meters wide or so. It's almost like a tennis court size, and it doesn't have any, I don't even think it had netting. It was a little rink just for, it was at a touristic attraction called the Big Banana. And they had, it was kind of one of those things, I think, in the 80s where they made a big giant, 40-meter long banana on the side of the highway, and it's this big banana farm. They, for travelers to just stop into, and then they got some, a bit of notoriety with that, and they put in like a fake ski slope, a little skating rink, dodgem cars, like a toboggan, all this random stuff. But I remember when I was still like just playing, in my rec hockey, we went and played against some just locals from there that were playing hockey, and they didn't really have much of anything like a league or anything there. It was just there would have been maybe 100 people that played hockey there.
Mm-hmm.
But we just went up and played like a friendly game.
Right.
And that was the first time that I'd traveled somewhere to play ice hockey and had a jersey and was the first representative time of being like, I don't know. It was just a huge thing for me to even though it, in the scheme of things, it was kind of nothing. We're just playing this friendly game.
Right.
For me, it was, I was so proud of myself and proud and just, I just took it as like, I don't know, you hear about, teams playing like in all the leagues overseas and stuff like that, and towns going to play against other towns and that kind of thing. And it's kind of like, it was the first experience of something outside of just my Australian hockey experience that I was like, whoa, this is actually, I'm doing the thing right now, and so that was huge for me. I think that's probably the one for me. Yeah.
I remember my first road trip in college when, pulled up to the back of the rink and it was like, all right, pack up your bags, load them onto the bus. And, it was everybody bring whatever VHS tape they thought the team might want to watch. And then it was, captain got on the bus. All right, here are the options. What are we watching? And you'd be surprised what stupid movies we chose to pick on the bus. Of course, we always had to watch Slapshot every year. But like some of the movies, like I get back and my now wife's like, what'd you guys watch on the bus? And I would tell her, and she's like, a bunch of hockey players just watched that on the bus. Because it could be a kid's movie. There were quite a few rom-coms, too, that were watched on the bus. We're like, yeah, we like it. So what? But, yeah, same thing.
Watching The Notebook.
And not quite The Notebook, but there were some other ones that were pretty close. And, yeah. But that was my, I'm doing this moment, too, where it's, that first road trip where it's like, all right, this is pretty cool. So what's the best chirp you've heard on the ice, off the ice, directed at you, not directed at you?
Yeah. So we, like I said, we get imports that come over and play in the AHL, and we all take it seriously. It's competitive hockey, and we are playing for sheep stations, so to speak. But it's sometimes funny the first few games when European and North American pros come over or college players, and that because it's such a weird, like, I can't imagine how weird it would be for an import to come over and play in the RHL or the PHL because it's this, like I said, it's this weird in between. Like, is it senior hockey? Is it minor pro? Like, what is it? And as well, because the skill level in these teams go from guys that have played, 200 games in the coast or whatever, all the way down to the locals that haven't been overseas yet, that are kind of making up the numbers. So you've got this, and would probably be junior B or junior A. Probably not junior B, junior A, like mid-tier junior A level, I guess, players, or lower level junior A players. So that's from a roster, you've got that massive differentiation in players, right? So what happens when those players come over sometimes and they dangle the Aussie kid, the 19-year-old Aussie that's never been overseas or whatever, and it's a bit of like a kind of like, and then they might be a bit showy about something. And there's some of the Aussies that are just like, hey, Rockstar, you're not the NHL. You're playing ice hockey in Australia right now. just tone it down a little bit, kind of thing. And I remember one in our first game of the year in 2019, and our assistant captain Tommy Powell were playing against Adelaide, and there they had I think I don't know if it was, I think he played Canadian, like CIS, all right, the Canadian college hockey.
Oh yeah, yep,
yeah. And he start early in the game, and he does a glove save, but then just fully windmills it, like just sells it. And like, good for him. Like, yeah, he's trying to get the boys pumped, you know what I mean? Like, definitely, he's doing the right thing. but just does this huge thing, and he's just kind of like chucks the puck out of his glove, just being like, yeah, big dogs here kind of thing. And then our assistant captain skates over to him and he says, says, pump the brakes, big boy. You just saved a shot from an 18-year-old Aussie that's literally never played hockey outside this country, and he just went, oh, and just totally deflated. And I think he kind of ended up, that really planted the seed in him, kind of like,
messed with them.
Yeah, really, probably the most effective chirp of a goalie I think I've ever seen in my life. Actually, nice. Really, just yeah, it's funny.
So, what is the worst post-game beer you've had?
Worst post-game beer? Oh, well, I've been sober for about 8 years. So when I started playing hockey again, I wasn't drinking. But beforehand, when I was 18, 17, on the, and the legal age for alcohol in Australia is 18. So, yep. So we'd have, I was away with the boys and stuff like that on the bus, and they're all men, and I was 17 or 16 or whatever. But I remember having a beer. So we've got Victoria Bitter, aka hand grenades in Australia. They're these little in this green, so you get the cans, or you get what's called throwdowns, which are I think they're about a 230 ml bottle, like really short bottle, and you get them in a pack of 30, and they are hand grenades because you open it, you go. That's how you drink. That's how you drink PB, and it is not the best tasting beer in the universe. Yeah. And I remember being 16 or 17. I don't know, probably 16 and a half. And I was on the bus after a trip to Sydney, coming back with the guys, and they all crack the beers around the bus. And I think it was one of those situations where it's like coach and the manager is looking up the front of the bus quite deliberately, not looking back at seeing what's going on. And one of the guys gave me a VB, and like I think I'd had a cheeky beer here or there at a party or whatever, but it was a warm, gross, cheap Australian beer, and I was like absolutely knackered, thirsty, tired. And drinking that thing down with all my peers there, like kind of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have to look like now's the time to really,
like you've done it before.
Yeah, show everybody just how much of a man I am. And oh my god, that I think I almost puked after that beer, and this is kind of like would have been early in the season, so it would still be 30 degrees outside, kind of thing, in a bus without air conditioning. Would have been just stinking hot, all that gear in there. Yeah, that was not a fun situation.
No wonder you're sober.
Yeah. A couple too many situations like that, maybe.
Yeah. So when you tape your stick, do you go heel to toe or toe to heel?
I go heel to toe. And over the toe, and then cut around.
You're in the majority then. So what is your favorite number to wear and why?
So 75 is my number now. So that came from, it's got a weird lineage kind of thing. So when I didn't even think I picked my number when I was playing. It was just you got the number 30 or the number 1. Mm-hmm. That was it. And then when I went over to Notre Dame, we got our kind of training camp jerseys or whatever. And my number was 54 for that. And so when I was just given 30 or number 1 or number 31 when I played. But when I came back over, I loved wearing it because it was like I don't know about you, like having a good training jersey.
Yeah,
I love it. It's a bit maybe a bit nerdy, but I really like to be like, look, this is who you're dealing with right now, you know.
Yeah.
And so I'd wear it when I got back. And so when I got back into playing again, I started playing with 54. And it was kind of a bit of I would have gone probably with 32, but it was a bit of, I guess, a thing for me to be like, yep, this is my new version of me playing hockey. And so that's going to be my number.
Right.
And then from there, that went to, I think the first team I was in had a 54, so I went to 57. I can't remember why, but I went to a 57. And then when I went to the Melbourne Ice, they had one of their longtime players, Jason Backleague, was 57. So I had to change it. So I changed it to 75. And so from that first season back playing at big boy hockey, swapped at 75, and that's kind of where I went to from there. And I do like the 77s and 88s, and I do like the non-traditional goalie number. I do appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah, so 75 for me.
Well, and that's kind of where the idea of this question came from, because my college goalie coach, he asked me, he's like, what's with these younger goalies with like 19 and 88? And I was like, I don't know, but I'm sure the story behind it's great. So that's why I started asking that question. It's like, what's favorite number and why? Because there's been quite a few that are the non-traditional goalie numbers, but there's been good stories behind them. And when there's that story behind it, who cares what number you wear?
Yeah. And it's I think it's good. Like, as I hear you on your podcast, and it's the same. I got to say, it's the same ubiquitous across ice hockey everywhere. Is you're not allowed to have a personality. You've got to be the cookie cutter hockey player, and just kicking back against that a little bit is good.
Yeah. Well, that was my favorite number as a kid was 30, because I was an Eddie Belfour fan. 30 was my number. Then I went to high school, and 30 wasn't an option, but 35 was. I went, okay, that works, because the summer going into high school, one of my teammates who wore number 5 had passed away. I went, okay, I can go with 35. This works. Well, then I got to college, and 35 was taken by the seniors. So there was no way I was getting that one. So I just went to the cabinet, and I found the biggest jersey in there. And it happened to be number 39. And that's what Dominic Hasek was wearing at the time. And it fit my style of play. And so my teammates like, you chose that on purpose, didn't you? I was like, no, it's just the biggest jersey in here. Because we would be out in our field house stretching, and all these guys, and we would wear our jerseys while we stretch. And all these guys, their jerseys looked like they fit them. And I looked like a 12-year-old wearing my dad's jersey as I'm stretching. And I'm like, no, look, this is why I grabbed this one. But 39 after that, it's just like, it's that non-traditional goalie number, somewhat traditional these days, but still non-traditional, fit the personality. Now I like it.
Nice.
Yeah. So the last question, what advice do you have for young goalies?
Oh, well, I'd say I'll probably have two different versions of that answer. So it'd be what I would say to hockey goalies in Australia and other non-traditional hockey countries, because I got to say the experience is very, very, very different. I from all accounts, very different. So for goalies in Australia, or Israel or South Africa or whatever, I would just say just stay stoked on it. Get everything, get everything you can, get as absorbed in it as you can, but at the same time, don't let it kind of define you, and even though that's probably something that's also relevant to kids everywhere, but in Australia and those other countries where it is harder to get, I guess not really these days. I guess my experience is probably a bit different as it is now, that you can just get NHL TV or whatever. But do that, buy into it, but just don't let it be the be all and end all, because it can be quite confronting when you go overseas, or if you do want to go further at it, and all of a sudden you're in front of you're at a midget, you're in front of a bantam that shoots better than anybody that you've ever faced before.
Yeah.
It can be a bit of a shell shock,
Yeah.
And probably in general though, it'd be play another sport. Like in the summer, go play baseball or go skateboarding or go BMX riding or do something. Like, I guess I coach as well, obviously, and it's the same here as it is over there with kids just wanting, like, parents coming up to me and saying, all right, cool, I'm going to get them to do this and that and this stretching and all that every day, and we're doing this, and by the way, is my kid going to make the NHL kind of thing? And same here, and I'm sure that a million other goalie coaches around the world will attest to that's how it is. It's just you've got to be an athlete. You've got to be able to. It's the difference between making that save when butterfly breaks down, or when you're and I've heard your other guests say the same thing. It's about when you get caught going left to right, you got to get back the other way. You've got to be able to kick your foot out and stop the puck, not just rely on a box or whatever. And all of those other sports just teach you how to use your body. And I think that's an advantage that I had when I started playing, was because I'd played cricket and soccer and rugby and everything else. And so I came into it with a really good understanding of how my body worked. And I was a lanky, fit young kid that the rest of my body could, help me out with my hips and my knees and doing a butterfly and all that kind of stuff. And so that's what I'd say. Play something else at the same time. In summer, go play something else.
And that's great advice. You play the other sport to prevent that burnout, but also you exercise other muscles. You get more comfortable with your body, so that when you do have to make that desperation save, somehow you feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah. And what my straight up advice is to people here is get your son or your daughter to play cricket, get them to be a wicket keeper, because in cricket, the ball goes down the wicket, bounces up, and then you play it. So it's not a straight line. So you get pretty good at understanding tips and stuff like that, because the ball's actually on a trajectory down, bouncing, and then coming up. But it's still really fast, and then you're catching it off a ricochet from the batsman that's only a couple of meters in front of you. So it's actually incredibly good for your hand-eye coordination and your reflexes.
That would have helped me in my last game. There was a shot from the point. I'm watching it come in, and my defenseman was maybe 2 feet in front of me and just lifts his stick up. And I'm watching this puck right into my glove, and I'm here, the puck's here, he hits it, goes right over my glove, and I just look at him and I went, I had it. I had it. Why did you have to? There was nobody between me and you. Why did you have to touch it? He's like, I'm sorry, I'm learning.
Now all we need to do is figure out what that sport is that allows us to see through players, and then play that in summer. That's the one.
Yeah, exactly.
Get that skill going.
Exactly. Well, Tom, it has been a lot of fun talking to you. I feel like we could just keep talking all night for me, all afternoon for you, if we really wanted to. But I'm sure our families would probably get mad at us if we kept doing that. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thanks a lot for asking me on. And it's great to chat to you.
Yeah, well, it's just fun to, the idea of the podcast was talk to goalies of all ages and skill levels. So, I think I've done a good job of trying to get some of those younger goalies in there, some of the older ones. But I've really been trying to focus on, getting some more of those female goalies in, and some of the goalies, from outside of North America, because when we all start talking, we're doing the same thing. We're just playing goalie. So our stories, even though we're all over the place, boy, girl, whatever, our story's the same. That's what I've learned.
And for all the people that are out there that are in those other countries and in non-traditional hockey markets and stuff, this is the kind of content that you need, because we can't go down the street and talk to somebody or talk to dad or mum about their experience in hockey, and having having more stories that you can in some way connect with and relate to, I think is really important, because you don't feel like it's some other universe that you just can't get to. It's kind of, you can still do it. You can still get into the game and love the game. So yeah.
Yeah. And I mean,
Really
I love the In Goal podcast because they talk a lot of the technical side of things and they talk to the elite goalies. But to your point, I think it's important too for, the beer league goalies like myself and, some of the others I talk to, we're not all going to play pro hockey, but we still love the game. And it's important to hear those voices of those goalies that, like myself, I played college hockey, but I was a JV third string goalie. That's fine. That's, as long as you have that passion to play at the highest level you play at, own it. Don't be ashamed of it that you didn't go farther. It's like, hey, you got as far as your God-given talents would take you. And for me, I wouldn't even say they were God-given talents. I just had to work my butt off because, I wasn't as talented as some of my teammates. That's for sure.
But you're totally right. We're all here because we love the game. If we wanted to, if your goal is to play professionally and make $1 million, I feel like there's a lot of other ways it's a lot easier to make $1 million and be a hockey player.
Right.
You're not really playing the odds.
No,
making it difficult for yourself. And it's at the end of the day, and I feel like there's some people in the play like competitively or elite or pro or whatever that maybe kind of get a little bit gun shy about being like, this is about the love of the game. It's not about who's got the most rings or what your save percentage is or who's played where or anything like that or your contract. We play because we love the game and we want to grow it. And that's nothing like sitting down, eating a hot dog and watching a game of hockey,
Yeah. Or even being in the locker room with the fellas. I mean, when I was done with college, I wanted to keep, involved in the game because it was like that's what you miss when you are away from it. Because I took time off when my kids were little and it's like, that's what I miss most. Honestly, I didn't even miss playing the games. I missed the locker room and practice. That's what I missed.
Yeah, I've come out, like I said, to Dubbo for work because I'm an ecologist, and so I'm out here and I'm not around hockey much anymore, really. And out of everything, I'm missing the boys for sure. Just chirping in pracky and kind of just catching up with everyone and that, just having your little thing, and it makes it even more special because it's that season and it's those people, and then you're never going to have that again with that group. And it's the most magic part. I reckon one of the most magic parts of the game for my looking back at everything that I've done is that those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Well, Tom, again, thank you. I appreciate it. It was. I would say a long time coming because we started texting, I think, earlier this summer, and then things went down with me. So I took a little bit of a break. So I'm glad I was able to get you back on, and we were able to schedule it around the massive time difference.
So it's 11:30 a.m. on Sunday for me right now. So.
Yeah, it's 6:30 in the evening on Saturday night here. So if I could get the Saturday night Powerball numbers for me, that would be great.
oh, they're in the other room. Sorry, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.